The house is quiet. Everyone else has gone to sleep. And your mind keeps going. Not with worry, exactly. Not with anxiety. Just thinking, turning over ideas, replaying a conversation from 3 days ago, working through a theory you can't let go of. Your brain never stops. And after years of this, you've started to wonder if there's something wrong with you. Because most people don't do this. Most people can just turn off, but you can't. And here's what nobody tells you about this. It's not a flaw, but it comes with a cost, a weight that builds quietly over decades. The people around you, they talk, but they don't go deep. They stay on the surface. And when you try to go deeper, they pull back. So you stop trying. You retreat inward. You safeguard the quiet truth inside you, because it's easier than explaining layers most people will never see. Some of the deepest minds in history understood this. They knew that silence isn't escape. It's where clarity lives. And the weight you feel, it's not weakness. It's depth most people will never reach. But here's the real question. Are you using this depth, or is it using you? Because what comes next will show you the difference. Let me tell you something I've noticed over the years. There's a particular kind of exhaustion that comes with thinking too deeply. It's not physical tiredness. It's not the kind of fatigue you get from a long day at work or a sleepless night. It's something else entirely. It's the weight of carrying thoughts that never fully resolve, ideas that loop back on themselves, conversations you replay not because you're anxious, but because you're trying to understand what was really being said beneath the words. The majority of people don't live this way. They can have a conversation, walk away, and never think about it again. The interaction ends when the words stop. But you're still thinking about it 3 days later. Not obsessively, not neurotically, just deeply. You're turning it over in your mind like a stone in your hand, examining every angle, every texture, every hidden meaning. You're looking for the truth beneath the surface, the intention behind the tone, the subtext that everyone else missed. And for years, you've wondered if this makes you strange, if there's something broken in the way your mind works. Because the world around you seems to move so much faster. People talk in shortcuts. They skim the surface of ideas and move on. They're satisfied with explanations that feel incomplete to you. And when you try to go deeper, when you try to explore the layers beneath the obvious, you see them glaze over. You see them pull back. You see them lose interest. So you've learned to keep it to yourself. You've learned to nod along, to smile, to let conversations stay shallow, because it's easier than watching people retreat from the depth you naturally inhabit. And over time, this creates a kind of loneliness that's hard to name, because you're not alone in the traditional sense. You have people around you, you have interactions, you have relationships, but you're alone in your depth, alone in the way you think, alone in the questions that keep you awake at night while everyone else sleeps peacefully. And here's what makes it even harder. You can't explain this to anyone without sounding arrogant, without sounding like you think you're better than everyone else. But that's not what this is. You don't feel superior. You feel isolated. You feel like you're speaking a language no one else understands. And the more you try to translate it into something simpler, something more accessible, the more you lose the essence of what you're trying to say. So you stop trying, you retreat, you preserve your inner calm, because it's the only place where you don't have to simplify yourself. Schopenhauer understood this better than most. He wrote extensively about the burden of sensitivity, the way certain minds are built to perceive more, to feel more, to process more. And he didn't frame it as a gift. He didn't romanticize it. He framed it honestly, as both a capacity and a weight. Because when you think deeply, you don't just see what's in front of you. You see what's beneath it, what's behind it, what it connects to, what it implies, what it reveals about human nature, about society, about the structures we all pretend are solid but are actually fragile. And that kind of vision is exhausting in a world that prefers simplicity, in a world that rewards speed over depth, in a world where people are praised for having strong opinions quickly, not for taking time to think things through. You're moving at a different pace. You're operating at a different level. And the gap between where you are and where others are, it widens every year. But here's what's interesting. The exhaustion isn't the problem. The problem is the isolation that comes with it. Because when you think at this level, you start to notice how few people can meet you there, how few people want to. And that realization, that slow, quiet understanding that you're operating at a profundity most will never reach, it changes you. It makes you more careful, more guarded, more selective about who you let into your inner world. And this is where the real cost reveals itself. Because the same depth that allows you to see so much also makes connection harder. You can't do small talk the way other people do. You can't pretend to care about surface-level conversations. You can't fake interest in things that feel meaningless to you. And so, without even meaning to, you start to withdraw. Not because you're antisocial, not because you're cold, but because shallow interaction feels like a performance you no longer have the energy to maintain. You've tried. Over the years, you've tried to engage with conversations that don't interest you. You've tried to smile and nod and act like you care about topics that feel trivial, but it drains you. It feels like you're wearing a mask, like you're playing a role in a play you never auditioned for. And after a while, you realize that the energy it takes to maintain that performance is energy you could be using for something that actually matters to you. So you stop, you retreat, you choose solitude over half-hearted connections, and the world calls you withdrawn, antisocial, difficult. But you're not any of those things. You're just tired of pretending. Let me speak directly to you for a moment. If this feels familiar, I want you to understand something. Your brain isn't broken. It's not malfunctioning. What you're experiencing is the natural consequence of a mind that refuses to stay on the surface. And yes, it comes with a cost. Yes, it makes certain kinds of connection harder. But it also gives you access to something rare, clarity. Because while everyone else is rushing through life, skimming the surface, reacting without reflecting, you're doing something different. You're observing, you're processing, you're understanding. And that understanding, that depth of perception, it's not common, it's rare, and it's valuable, even when it feels isolating. But here's where it gets complicated, because there's a difference between using this depth and being used by it. There's a difference between thinking deeply as a tool for clarity and thinking deeply as a trap that keeps you stuck. And those who think the way you do often never learn to make that distinction. They spend their entire lives carrying the weight of their thoughts without ever learning how to work with them, how to channel them, how to use them as a source of strength instead of exhaustion. And that's the shift I want to talk about. Because once you understand the difference, once you see that your depth isn't the problem, the way you're managing it is, everything changes. You stop feeling broken. You stop feeling like you need to be fixed. And you start to see this capacity for what it really is. Not a burden, not a flaw, but a form of perception that most people will never access. Before we go deeper, I want to pause for a moment, because this quiet shift, this understanding that depth is not a flaw, it's happening all over the world, in small corners, in quiet rooms, in people who've spent decades feeling like they didn't fit. And if you're one of them, if this resonates with something you've carried for years, then you've found the right place. This is a quiet corner of the internet for people who think too deeply, who feel too much, who see too much, and who are finally ready to stop apologizing for it. If that's you, stay, join this space. And in the comments, share what resonated most, because the people here understand. Let's continue, because what comes next changes everything. So let's talk about what that actually looks like. Because this isn't about stopping your brain from thinking. That's not possible. And honestly, it's not even desirable. The depth you carry, the way you process the world, It's part of who you are. You don't need to suppress it or fix it, but you do need to understand it. And once you understand it, you can start to work with it instead of against it. The first thing to recognize is that your need for silence isn't avoidance. It's not escapism. It's not you running away from life. It's you creating the space you need to process life. Because when you think deeply, you need time. You need quiet. You need room to let your thoughts unfold without interruption. And in a world that's constantly noisy, constantly demanding, constantly pulling your attention in 1,000 directions, that kind of space is hard to find. So you create it. You retreat into your own company. You safeguard the quiet truth inside you. And that's not weakness, that's wisdom. But here's what the world never realizes. The same people who judge you for being too quiet or too withdrawn are often the ones who can't sit with their own thoughts for 5 minutes. They need constant stimulation, constant distraction, constant noise. Because silence, for them, is uncomfortable. It forces them to confront things they'd rather avoid. But you don't fear silence. You crave it. Because silence, for you, isn't empty. It's full. It's where clarity lives. It's where understanding happens. It's where you finally get to think without interference. And that's the paradox, isn't it? The world tells you that being alone too much is unhealthy, that you should be more social, more outgoing, more connected. But what the world doesn't understand is that for people like you, connection isn't about quantity, it's about quality. You don't need 100 friends. You don't need constant interaction. You need 1 or 2 people who can meet you at your depth, who can think with you, who can sit in silence with you and understand that the silence isn't awkward, it's sacred. Because that's what deep thinkers understand that others don't. Silence isn't the absence of connection. It's a different kind of connection. It's connection with yourself, with your thoughts, with the truth that lives beneath the noise. And when you find someone who can sit in that silence with you, who doesn't need to fill every moment with words, who understands that sometimes the deepest conversations happen without speaking, that's when you know you've found your people. Jung talked about this in a different way. He talked about the persona, the mask we wear in social situations, the version of ourselves we present to the world. And he understood that for some people, that mask becomes exhausting to maintain. Because the gap between who you are internally and who you're expected to be externally, it's too wide. And the deeper you think, the wider that gap becomes. Until eventually, you stop trying to bridge it. You stop performing. You stop pretending. And you retreat into the only place where you can be fully yourself, your own inner world. But here's the cost of that retreat. The more time you spend in your inner world, the harder it becomes to connect with the outer one. Not because you're incapable of connection, but because the connections available to you feel shallow, performative, exhausting. And so you find yourself in this strange position where you're surrounded by people, but still feel completely alone. Because the loneliness isn't about physical isolation. It's about intellectual and emotional isolation. It's about being the only person in the room who's thinking at a certain depth. And that kind of loneliness, it's one of the hardest kinds to name. Because how do you explain to someone that you feel alone in a crowded room? How do you explain that the problem isn't the absence of people, it's the absence of depth? How do you explain that you're not looking for more connections? You're looking for deeper ones. You can't, not without sounding like you're judging everyone else, not without sounding like you think you're better. So you keep it to yourself. You smile, you nod, you play the role, and you go home exhausted, not from the interaction itself, but from the performance of pretending the interaction mattered. And over time, that exhaustion builds. It becomes a weight you carry everywhere, a heaviness that settles into your bones. And you start to wonder if it's worth it. If the effort of maintaining these shallow connections is worth the loneliness of not having deep ones. And for those who think the way you do, the answer eventually becomes no. It's not worth it. And so they retreat. They choose solitude. They choose their own company, not because they hate people, but because they love peace more. So what do you do with this? How do you live with a mind that never stops? How do you navigate a world that doesn't value the kind of depth you carry? The answer isn't to change who you are. It's not to force yourself to be more social or more outgoing or more normal. The answer is to accept that you're wired differently and to build a life that honors that wiring instead of fighting it. That means protecting your energy. It means being selective about who you let into your inner world. It means saying no to shallow interactions without guilt. It means creating space for silence, for solitude, for the kind of deep thinking that restores you instead of draining you. And it means letting go of the idea that you need to be understood by everyone. Because the truth is, the world won't understand you. And that's okay. You're not looking for the world. You're looking for the few who can meet you where you are. And those people exist. They're rare, yes, but they're out there. And when you find them, you'll know. Because the conversation won't feel like work. It won't feel like a performance. It will feel like relief, like finally being able to breathe, like coming home to a version of connection you thought didn't exist. And when you find that, when you experience that kind of depth with another person, you realize that all the years of loneliness, all the years of feeling misunderstood, they were worth it. Because you were waiting for this, for someone who could meet you at your depth, for someone who didn't need you to simplify yourself, for someone who understood that your silence wasn't coldness, it was contemplation. But until you find those people, you have to learn to be okay with your own company. And I don't mean that in a motivational, self-help kind of way. I mean it practically. Because if you're someone who thinks deeply, your own company is where you'll spend most of your time. And if you can't find peace there, if you can't find clarity there, if you can't find meaning there, then you'll always feel like something's missing. But if you can learn to use your solitude as a tool, as a space for reflection, for creativity, for understanding, then it stops being a burden. It becomes a sanctuary. And that's the shift. That's the difference between thinking deeply as a trap and thinking deeply as a power. Because when you stop fighting your nature, when you stop trying to be someone you're not, when you stop apologizing for the way your mind works, something changes. You stop feeling broken. You stop feeling like you need to be fixed. And you start to see this way of being for what it really is. Not a flaw, but a form of clarity that the world around you will never access. Because here's what the world doesn't understand. Depth isn't just about thinking more. It's about seeing more. It's about understanding the connections between things that seem unrelated. It's about recognizing patterns that others miss. It's about perceiving the truth beneath the surface. And that kind of perception, it's not something you can teach. It's not something you can learn from a book. It's something you're born with, or something that develops over years of observation, of reflection, of refusing to accept easy answers. And yes, it comes with loneliness. Yes, it comes with exhaustion. Yes, it comes with the quiet ache of being misunderstood. But it also comes with something rare, the ability to see beneath the surface, to understand what others miss, to think in layers, to live with a profundity that transforms everything you touch. So here's what I want you to take from this. You're not too much. You're not too intense. You're not too deep. You're exactly what the world needs more of. People who think, who reflect, who refuse to skim the surface, who carry the weight of understanding even when it's heavy. Because that weight, that refusal to settle for shallow answers, that's not a burden. That's a gift. And the world needs it, even if the world doesn't always know how to receive it. But here's the question that remains. Now that you understand this, now that you see your depth for what it is, what do you do with it? Because understanding alone isn't enough. You have to learn how to live with it, how to protect it, how to use it without letting it drain you. And that's a different conversation. one that requires looking at the hidden patterns of deep thinkers, the traps they fall into, the ways they sabotage their own peace without realizing it. Because depth without boundaries becomes overwhelm. And if you don't learn to set those boundaries, your greatest strength will become your greatest weakness. A quiet corner of the internet for people who choose solitude over half-hearted connections.